I'm Mackenzie Evans, 29, and last week I finally got the marketing director promotion I've been working toward for years. I planned a celebration dinner at Preston's with my family, including my sister Amber, who has fibromyalgia. Our relationship has been complicated since her diagnosis. What happened that night exposed years of family dysfunction when Amber collapsed dramatically right as I announced my promotion. But I was prepared. I'd recorded a video just 30 minutes earlier predicting exactly what she would do. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to follow my journey navigating family drama while building my career. Growing up, Amber and I were inseparable despite our 3-year age gap. She was my protector, my confidant, the person who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me navigate the social minefield of middle school. We shared a bedroom until I was 13, whispering secrets after our parents thought we were asleep. I idolized her. When she got her driver's license, she'd take me for ice cream after school. When I had my first heartbreak at 16, she stayed up all night with me, eating cookie dough and assuring me I deserved better. Our parents, Linda and Robert Evans, treated us differently, though. Dad was an engineer who valued achievement and results. Mom was a nurse who seemed to have endless reserves of empathy for everyone except herself. Dad clearly favored me, the ambitious one who brought home straight A's and captained the debate team. Mom gravitated toward Amber, who was more creative and sensitive. Everything changed during Amber's sophomore year of college. She started experiencing debilitating pain that moved throughout her body. Some days she could barely get out of bed. She visited doctor after doctor, each one running tests that came back normal, some suggesting the pain might be all in her head. I remember one specialist telling her to try yoga and reduce stress, as if that would solve everything. After nearly a year of medical mystery tours, a rheumatologist finally diagnosed her with fibromyalgia. The family response was mixed. Mom immediately became Amber's fierce advocate, researching the condition obsessively and accompanying her to every appointment. Dad was skeptical, occasionally making comments like, "Back in my day, we just pushed through the pain." I was somewhere in between. I believed she was in pain, but sometimes I wondered if she was leaning into it too much, especially when her flare-ups coincided with major events in my life. I'm not proud to admit this, but sometimes I questioned the convenience of her timing. When I graduated from college with honors, Amber had such severe pain she needed a wheelchair for the ceremony, drawing concerned glances from everyone. When I got my first promotion, she had to leave my celebration early because of a migraine. I felt guilty for even thinking this way. Who would choose to be in pain? But the pattern was hard to ignore. As Amber's condition worsened, she had to drop out of college. She moved back home with our parents, who converted the den into a bedroom for her so she wouldn't have to navigate stairs. I continued on my path, graduating with a marketing degree and landing a job at Bradley and Hayes, a mid-sized marketing firm with impressive clients. I threw myself into my work, partly to escape the increasingly tense family dynamics at home. Mom became Amber's caretaker, scheduling her life around Amber's doctor appointments and bad days. Dad retreated into longer hours at work, uncomfortable with a situation he couldn't fix with logic or effort. And I visited less and less, feeling guilty about my health and success, while simultaneously resenting how Amber's condition had become the sun around which our family orbited. By the time I was 26, I had moved to an apartment downtown and was steadily climbing the corporate ladder. My visits home became predictable. Dad would brag about my accomplishments. Mom would gently remind everyone of Amber's struggles, and Amber would either put on a brave face or have a health crisis that refocused everyone's attention. I started dreading family gatherings, then feeling terrible about dreading them. 2 years ago, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Taylor, to work through my complicated feelings. She helped me understand that it was possible to both love my sister and feel frustrated by the dynamics her illness had created. She encouraged me to rebuild my relationship with Amber separate from our parents. I tried. I invited Amber to my apartment for sisters' nights. I researched fibromyalgia to better understand her experience. I sent her care packages with heating pads and specialty teas. Sometimes it worked. We'd have glimpses of our old closeness, laughing at inside jokes or reminiscing about childhood adventures. Other times, the weight of unspoken resentments hung between us like a heavy curtain. Last year, Amber started dating Michael, a physical therapist she met at a pain management clinic. He seemed to genuinely understand her condition and treated her with a compassion that didn't slip into pity. For the first time in years, she had someone besides our mother who fully believed and supported her. I was genuinely happy for her, even as I noticed that her pain episodes became less frequent around him, but still flared dramatically around family gatherings centered on my achievements. Dr. Taylor suggested that Amber might unconsciously be seeking the attention and validation she felt she'd lost when her illness forced her to abandon her own ambitions. It made sense, but understanding the pattern didn't make it easier to deal with when it happened. I wanted to be compassionate, but I also wanted to enjoy my own milestones without them becoming about Amber. By the time my big promotion came around, our relationship had improved but remained fragile. I wanted to include her in my celebration, wanted her to be genuinely happy for me. But as I planned the dinner, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that history would repeat itself. I just didn't know yet how dramatically it would play out, or how it would finally force us to confront the dysfunction we'd been dancing around for years. The past 6 months at Bradley and Hayes had been nothing short of exhilarating. Our team had landed the Meridian Hotels account, a client we'd been courting for years. As the senior marketing strategist, I was tasked with developing their rebranding campaign, a high-visibility project that would either establish us as a top-tier agency or become a very public failure. For weeks, I barely saw my apartment except to shower and change clothes. My boyfriend Brian was endlessly patient, bringing me dinner at the office and listening to me brainstorm taglines at midnight. I canceled plans with friends, worked through weekends, and dreamt about font choices and color schemes. The campaign consumed me, but in the best possible way. I felt alive, purposeful, completely in my element. When we presented to Meridian's executive team, I was terrified but prepared. I'd rehearsed until every word flowed naturally, anticipated every possible question, and built contingencies into the proposal. When their CEO leaned forward after our presentation and simply said, "This is exactly what we've been looking for," the rush was indescribable. Our team celebrated that night, but I knew the real work was just beginning. The next 3 months were a blur of implementation challenges, midnight revisions, and intense collaboration. The campaign launched to overwhelming positive response. Social media engagement increased by 340%. Booking rates jumped 28% in the first month, and industry publications featured our work as a case study in effective rebranding. 2 weeks after the metrics confirmed our success, Nathan Phillips, our managing director, called me into his office. As I sat across from his imposing mahogany desk, he leaned back in his chair and fixed me with an appraising look. "The board and I have been discussing the future of the company," he said, tapping his pen against a folder. "With our recent growth, we need to restructure the leadership team. We need someone with vision and proven results to serve as marketing director." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the position I'd been working toward since joining the company 5 years ago. "Your work on the Meridian campaign demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking and execution we need," Nathan continued. "We'd like to offer you the position, with the corresponding salary adjustment and team expansion." I managed to maintain my professional composure during the meeting, asking thoughtful questions about responsibilities and expectations. But the moment I closed his office door behind me, I had to duck into the bathroom to contain my excitement. The salary increase alone would allow me to finally pay off my student loans and start thinking about buying a condo instead of renting. The professional recognition validated years of late nights and sacrificed weekends. That evening, Brian took me to our favorite rooftop bar to celebrate. As we clinked glasses under string lights, looking out at the city skyline, he asked how I wanted to share the news with my family. "I want to do something special," I said. "Something that brings everyone together in a positive way." The idea of a family dinner at Preston's took shape. Preston's was the restaurant where we'd celebrated special occasions throughout my childhood, my parents' anniversaries, Amber's high school graduation, my college acceptance. It was upscale without being pretentious, with private dining rooms that would allow us to celebrate without the noise and distractions of the main restaurant. I made reservations for the following Friday and sent formal invitations to my parents, Amber, my Aunt Grace, and cousin Rachel. I specified cocktail attire, wanting to emphasize the significance of the occasion. Brian would join us later for dessert after his late meeting. As the day approached, I threw myself into planning details, selecting a menu that accommodated everyone's preferences and dietary needs, ordering a custom cake with the Bradley and Hayes logo and "Congratulations, Marketing Director," written in elegant script, choosing a champagne that even my picky father would approve of. The night before the dinner, Mom called to confirm that Amber was having a good day and would definitely attend. "She's so proud of you, sweetie," she assured me, though something in her tone suggested she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "We all are." I wanted to believe her. I wanted this dinner to be different, wanted to be able to shine without Amber's health immediately pulling focus. But as I hung up, I couldn't shake the familiar anxiety settling in my stomach, the sense that I was setting myself up for disappointment. That anxiety must have shown on my face because Brian, who was helping me pick out jewelry for the occasion, set down the earrings he was holding and came to sit beside me on the bed. "What's wrong?" he asked, his hand warm on my shoulder. "Nothing," I said automatically, then sighed. "Everything. I'm excited about tomorrow, but I'm also dreading it." "Is that terrible?" "It's honest," he said. "Your concerns are based on pretty consistent past experiences. Have you thought about what Dr. Taylor suggested?" I nodded slowly. Dr. Taylor had suggested that I document the pattern I'd observed, not to prove Amber wrong or catch her in some manipulation, but to help me process my own feelings and possibly open a conversation about the dynamics at play. "Maybe I'll record something before everyone arrives," I said, "just to get my thoughts in order." What I didn't say, what I barely admitted to myself, was that part of me wanted validation, wanted proof that I wasn't imagining things, that my frustration had legitimate grounds. I didn't yet realize how that decision would change everything. The pattern started small. During my high school graduation party, Amber, then a college sophomore, developed a sudden migraine that required her to lie down in a darkened room. My parents took turns checking on her, bringing ice packs and medication, while I opened gifts at the dining room table with my friends, trying not to feel slighted by their divided attention. In college, when I made Dean's List my freshman year, my parents planned to take me to dinner. Amber called that morning to say she'd fallen and sprained her wrist. Dinner was canceled. We ordered pizza to eat at the hospital while she got x-rays. After her fibromyalgia diagnosis, these incidents seemed more medically legitimate, but still followed a suspicious timing pattern. My college graduation should have been my moment. I'd double majored in marketing and business administration, graduating summa cum laude. Instead, all anyone could talk about was Amber's need for a wheelchair that day, how brave she was to attend despite being in tremendous pain. Photos from that day show me in my cap and gown, smile fixed, while family members hover protectively around Amber. 2 years ago, when I received my first promotion to senior strategist, we planned a small family dinner. Amber arrived looking pale and withdrew halfway through the meal with a severe migraine and nausea. My parents immediately shifted into caretaker mode, my father driving her home while my mother packed up food for them. I was left at the restaurant with my Aunt Grace, who patted my hand and said, "Your sister just can't help these things, dear." My engagement party to my now ex-fiancé Jason was the worst. Amber had been doing well for months, even starting part-time work as a remote graphic designer. But as Jason and I were about to make our speech to our gathered friends and family, Amber fainted dramatically near the gift table. The party essentially ended as she was taken to the emergency room. Tests showed nothing new or concerning, just her usual fibromyalgia symptoms flaring up. Jason, who had already expressed frustration with my family dynamics, broke off our engagement 2 months later, citing my inability to set boundaries as one reason. After that incident, I started therapy with Dr. Taylor. In her calm, book-lined office, I finally expressed the thoughts I'd been ashamed to voice even to myself. What if Amber's pain was real but her timing was manipulative? What if she unconsciously used her condition to remain the center of attention in our family? What if my parents' excessive caretaking was actually enabling harmful patterns? It's not uncommon for family dynamics to become distorted around chronic illness, Dr. Taylor explained. Everyone falls into roles that become increasingly rigid. Your sister may genuinely be in pain, but the timing and expression of that pain might be influenced by psychological factors she's not fully aware of. She suggested that I start documenting these patterns, not as evidence against my sister, but as a way to clarify my own perceptions and potentially open an honest conversation about our family dynamics. For months, I kept notes in a private journal app. The pattern was undeniable. Amber's health crises consistently coincided with my achievements or celebrations. Sometimes the episodes were severe, requiring medical intervention. Other times they were just significant enough to redirect attention and concern. Always, my parents responded with immediate care and concern that overshadowed whatever we had gathered to celebrate. When I started dating Brian a year ago, I was cautious about introducing him to my family dynamics. He was perceptive enough to notice the pattern on his own after just 2 family gatherings. "Have you ever directly called this out?" he asked as we drove home from a tense Sunday lunch where Amber had developed sudden vertigo just as I was about to share news about a successful campaign. "I can't," I said. "How do you accuse someone of faking pain? Or even of unconsciously timing their very real pain to steal attention? I'd sound like a monster." "Not if you approach it with compassion," he suggested. "Maybe recording your thoughts before events would help you organize what you want to say." That suggestion planted the seed for what would happen at my promotion dinner. As the date approached, my anxiety grew. This promotion was too important, too hard one, to have it overshadowed again. The night before, I barely slept, rehearsing scenarios in my mind, imagining different ways Amber might pull focus and how I might respond. The day of the dinner, I arrived at Preston's an hour early to ensure everything was perfect. The private dining room was elegantly set with cream linens and low centerpieces of hydrangeas and roses. The champagne was chilling, the custom cake safely in the kitchen. Everything was ready. 30 minutes before my guests were due to arrive, I sat alone at the head of the table and opened my phone's video app. I hesitated, finger hovering over the record button, questioning if this was petty or mean-spirited. But then I remembered Dr. Taylor's words about clarifying my own perceptions, and I pressed record. It's 6:30 p.m. on Friday, October 15th. I began, feeling slightly ridiculous, but pushing forward. In half an hour, my family will arrive to celebrate my promotion to marketing director at Bradley and Hayes. Based on established patterns, I predict that Amber will have some kind of health crisis precisely when attention is focused on my achievement. I continued, my voice growing steadier. Specifically, I think it will happen when I stand to make my formal announcement. She'll either develop a sudden migraine, experience extreme pain requiring her to leave, or, if she's feeling particularly dramatic, actually collapse or faint. Mom will immediately shift to caretaker mode. Dad will look uncomfortable but follow Mom's lead, and my celebration will become another episode of The Amber Show. I paused, then added, I'm not saying her pain isn't real. I believe she has fibromyalgia and suffers genuinely. What I question is the consistent timing and whether there's an unconscious pattern of using health crises to maintain her role as the family focus. I'm recording this not to say, I told you so, but because I need to validate my own perceptions and possibly start an honest conversation about our family dynamics. I stopped recording and stared at my phone, feeling a mix of guilt and validation. What I didn't know then was that this 3-minute video would crack open years of family dysfunction and force us all to confront truths we'd been dancing around for far too long. Preston's was everything I remembered and more. The restaurant occupied the renovated ground floor of a historic building downtown, with exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings, and windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. The main dining room hummed with the pleasant cacophony of clinking glasses and conversation, but our private room at the back was an oasis of relative quiet. I checked my appearance one last time in the restroom mirror before guests arrived, smoothing my navy blue dress, adjusting the simple gold necklace Brian had given me for our anniversary. I looked professional, polished, celebratory. I practiced my smile, trying to channel genuine joy and push aside the anxiety that had been building all day. My parents arrived first, punctual as always. Dad looked uncomfortable in his suit, but had made the effort, a gesture that warmed me. Mom wore a floral dress I recognized from other special occasions, her hair freshly colored to hide the gray. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "We're so proud of you, sweetie," though her eyes kept darting to the door, anticipating Amber's arrival. "The table looks beautiful," Mom said, admiring the flowers. "You've thought of everything." Dad handed me a small gift bag. "A little something to celebrate," he said gruffly. Inside was a Mont Blanc pen engraved with my initials and new title. It was exactly the kind of practical yet luxurious gift he'd always favored, something to mark achievement, to be used in pursuing further success. "It's perfect, Dad." "Thank you both." I hugged him, feeling a surge of affection for this man who showed love through practical gestures rather than words. Aunt Grace arrived next, a whirlwind of perfume and jingling bracelets. My mother's sister had never married or had children, choosing instead to travel extensively and cultivate an eclectic group of friends. She'd always been my advocate, slipping me extra dessert as a child and later encouraging my career ambitions when my mother seemed more focused on Amber's health struggles. "Marketing director," she exclaimed, embracing me. "Robert, your daughter is an absolute powerhouse. Are you putting away enough for retirement? She'll be running that company in 5 years, mark my words." Dad beamed with pride while Mom made a show of examining the menu, uncomfortable with the fulsome praise directed solely at me. Cousin Rachel slipped in quietly during Aunt Grace's effusive greeting. Always the observer, Rachel had been my confidant throughout childhood and adolescence. She understood the family dynamics intimately but maintained enough distance to offer perspective. When she hugged me, she whispered, "I've got your back tonight," confirming she'd noticed the same patterns I had. The server came to take drink orders. Dad requested his usual scotch, neat. Mom asked for white wine. Aunt Grace ordered a cosmopolitan with exacting specifications. I chose champagne, determined to maintain the celebratory atmosphere regardless of what might unfold. At 7:15, 15 minutes after our reservation time, Amber finally arrived. I felt the familiar mix of love and wariness as she entered, leaning slightly on her boyfriend Michael's arm. She looked better than I'd expected. She'd made an effort with her appearance, wearing a green dress that complemented her eyes, her long hair twisted into an elegant updo. But the careful way she moved and the shadows under her eyes spoke of pain managed but not absent. "Sorry we're late," she said, embracing me carefully. "Traffic was awful." "We're just glad you could make it," I replied, genuinely meaning it despite my reservations. "You look beautiful." "Thanks to Michael's help with my hair," she said, smiling at her boyfriend. "I couldn't lift my arms above my shoulders today." And there it was, the first mention of her pain, casually inserted into conversation. I caught Rachel's knowing glance and took a deep breath, determined not to let it set the tone for the evening. We settled around the table, servers appearing with appetizers, crab cakes with remoulade, prosciutto-wrapped asparagus, bruschetta with heirloom tomatoes. The food was exquisite, the wine flowing freely, and conversation initially remained light. Dad dominated the early discussion, bragging about both his daughters with uncharacteristic openness. Between Mackenzie's business mind and Amber's artistic talent, he declared, "You girls got the best of your mother and me." Mom, warmed by wine and her husband's inclusive praise, relaxed enough to share anecdotes from our childhood, how I organized neighborhood kids to create a newspaper we sold for 25 cents, how Amber won a countywide art contest in 4th grade. For a moment, it felt like the family I'd always wanted us to be, supportive, loving, celebrating each other's strengths without competition or resentment. I caught Amber's eye across the table, and we shared a genuine smile, remembering the stories together. Then Aunt Grace, never one for tact, asked, "So, Mackenzie, are you and Brian thinking about making things official soon?" "At your age, I was already married with Rachel on the way." "Grace," Mom scolded, "don't pressure her. We're focusing on our careers right now," I said diplomatically. "Brian's up for partner at his firm next year, and I've just gotten this promotion. We're happy with how things are." "Well, don't wait too long," Aunt Grace persisted, glancing meaningfully at Amber and Michael. "You don't want all the good ones to be taken." An awkward silence fell, broken by the arrival of our main courses. As we navigated the momentary tension, Rachel steered the conversation towards safer territory, a documentary series she'd been watching, a new restaurant that had opened near her apartment. I shot her a grateful look. As we ate, I noticed Amber taking small bites, moving food around her plate more than consuming it. She declined wine, explaining that alcohol worsened her symptoms. Michael watched her with attentive concern, occasionally placing his hand over hers when he thought no one was looking. The meal progressed, the anticipation of my announcement building with each course. I'd planned to speak just before dessert, when everyone would be satisfied from the meal and receptive to celebration. As the servers cleared our plates, I caught Dad's eye. He nodded encouragingly, raising his glass in a subtle gesture of support. The moment had arrived. I stood, champagne flute in hand, heart racing with a mixture of pride and apprehension. All eyes turned to me, and for a beautiful, suspended moment, I felt like the protagonist in my own life story. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady and clear. "This promotion means so much to me, not just professionally but personally. It represents years of hard work, dedication, and—" I never got to finish that sentence. Because exactly as I reached the culmination of my speech, exactly as I'd predicted in my video 30 minutes before guests arrived, Amber gasped dramatically, her eyes rolling back, and slumped forward in her chair. "Amber!" Mom's cry pierced the air as she lunged across the table, nearly knocking over a water glass. The script I'd predicted in my video was playing out with eerie accuracy. Amber didn't respond. Her body had gone slack, Michael supporting her weight to keep her from sliding onto the floor. Her face had drained of color, making the shadows under her eyes stand out in stark relief. "Should I call 911? Dad asked, already pulling out his phone, his earlier pride in me forgotten in the sudden crisis. "Give her space," Michael said with the calm authority of someone used to medical situations. "This has happened before. It's likely a vasovagal response triggered by pain and fatigue." I stood frozen, my announcement speech dying on my lips, champagne flute still raised in a toast that would never be completed. The familiar feeling washed over me, disappointment tinged with guilt for feeling disappointed, frustration at the predictability of it all, and, beneath everything, genuine concern for my sister. "I'll get some water," Rachel said, the only one besides me who didn't seem panicked. The restaurant manager appeared at the doorway, drawn by the commotion. "Is everything all right?" Should we call for medical assistance? Just some privacy for a moment, please, I managed to say, professional training kicking in despite my emotional turmoil. Aunt Grace had moved to Amber's side, fanning her with a menu while Mom held her hand, murmuring reassurances though Amber still appeared unresponsive. Dad hovered uncertainly, his celebratory mood completely evaporated. As I watched this familiar scene unfold, something shifted inside me. Perhaps it was the culmination of years of pushed-aside resentment, or the stark contrast between my carefully planned celebration and this chaos, or simply the validation of seeing my prediction come true with such precision. Whatever the catalyst, I felt a sudden clarity and determination. I set down my champagne flute and reached for my purse. "She's coming around," Michael announced as Amber's eyelids fluttered. She made a small, pained sound, her hand going to her forehead. "Oh, sweetie," Mom soothed, stroking her hair. "It's okay. We're all here." "I'm so sorry," Amber whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't want to ruin your night, Mackenzie. I just suddenly felt like you were going to faint right as I was announcing my promotion." I finished for her, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just like you developed a migraine during my college graduation speech, and had to be rushed to the ER during my engagement party, and couldn't attend my first promotion dinner because of sudden vertigo." A stunned silence fell over the room. Mom looked at me with shock and disapproval. Dad seemed uncomfortable but not entirely surprised. Rachel's expression held a mixture of concern and validation, while Aunt Grace appeared utterly fascinated by the unfolding drama. "What are you saying?" Mom demanded, her protective instincts flaring. "Your sister has a serious medical condition. She can't help when it flares up." "I know she has fibromyalgia," I said, pulling my phone from my purse. "I've never questioned that her pain is real. What I'm questioning is the consistent timing of her most dramatic episodes." Amber was fully conscious now, color returning to her face as she registered what was happening. "Mackenzie, that's not fair," she protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I held up my phone. "I recorded something before you all arrived tonight. I think we should watch it." "This is completely inappropriate," Mom began, but Dad raised his hand. "Let's hear what Mackenzie has to say," he said, his engineer's mind perhaps recognizing a pattern he'd subconsciously noticed, but never articulated. I pressed play on the video, turning the screen so everyone could see. My recorded self appeared, sitting in this very room, speaking with calm certainty. "It's 6:30 p.m. on Friday, October 15th. In half an hour, my family will arrive to celebrate my promotion to marketing director at Bradley and Hayes. Based on established patterns, I predict that Amber will have some kind of health crisis precisely when attention is focused on my achievement." Amber's face crumpled as she watched, tears filling her eyes. Michael looked between her and the video, his expression unreadable. Mom's mouth had formed a perfect O of shock. The recording continued. "Specifically, I think it will happen when I stand to make my formal announcement. She'll either develop a sudden migraine, experience extreme pain requiring her to leave, or, if she's feeling particularly dramatic, actually collapse or faint." A choked sound escaped Amber's throat. Dad was nodding slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. "I'm not saying her pain isn't real," my recorded self continued. "I believe she has fibromyalgia and suffers genuinely. What I question is the consistent timing and whether there's an unconscious pattern of using health crises to maintain her role as the family focus." I stopped the video there, not wanting to play the rest. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sounds of the main restaurant and Amber's quiet sniffling. "How dare you," Mom finally said, her voice trembling with anger. "How dare you plan this ambush? Your sister is suffering, and you're treating her like she's manipulating us all." "That's not what I'm saying," I insisted, though part of me wondered if that was exactly what I'd been implying. "I'm saying we have unhealthy family dynamics that no one will acknowledge. Amber's condition is real, but our response to it has created patterns that hurt all of us. So now it's our fault? Mom demanded, gesturing between herself and Dad. We're bad parents for taking care of our daughter? No one's a bad parent, I said, struggling to articulate the complex emotions and observations that had led to this moment. But can any of you honestly say you don't see the pattern I'm talking about? The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Just then, the door opened and Brian appeared, smiling until he registered the tension in the room. Sorry I'm late, he said hesitantly. Did I miss the announcement? You missed quite a show, and Grace informed him with inappropriate enthusiasm. Amber stood abruptly, swaying slightly. I need some air, she said, her voice small and hurt. She pushed past Brian and out the door before anyone could react. Now look what you've done, Mom accused, rising to follow her. Dad hesitated, torn between his wife and daughter. Linda, wait, he said. Maybe we should talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Mom snapped. Mackenzie has made her feelings perfectly clear. She stormed out after Amber. Dad looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and dawning recognition. I'll go make sure they're okay, he said finally. We'll talk later. He followed Mom, leaving me with Rachel, Aunt Grace, Michael, and the newly arrived Brian. The beautiful celebration I'd planned lay in ruins around us. The uneaten dessert, the champagne going flat in abandoned glasses, the congratulatory cake still waiting in the kitchen, destined to go uneaten. Well, Aunt Grace said into the awkward silence, that was the most interesting family dinner we've had since your grandfather announced he was leaving Grandma for his secretary at Thanksgiving 1987. And despite everything, I found myself laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that released some of the tension coiled within me. Rachel joined in, then Brian, while Michael remained stoic, looking toward the door where Amber had disappeared. I should check on her, he said finally, standing. Michael, I called as he reached the door. I never meant to hurt her. I just couldn't keep pretending. He paused, turning back with an unreadable expression. I know you believe that, he said. But Amber's pain is real, even if the timing isn't coincidental. As he left, I slumped back into my chair, the victory of my promotion feeling hollow in the wake of family destruction I'd just precipitated. Was I wrong? I asked the remaining dinner guests, suddenly uncertain. You weren't wrong about the pattern, Rachel said carefully. But maybe there were better ways to address it than a public confrontation. Brian came to stand behind me, his hands warm and supportive on my shoulders. You were brave to speak your truth, he said. The fallout is messy, but sometimes that's necessary for real change. I nodded, but couldn't shake the image of Amber's devastated face as she watched my prediction come true exactly as I'd described it. I'd wanted validation, wanted to reclaim my moment, but somehow in doing so, I felt smaller rather than vindicated. The celebration dinner had indeed become unforgettable, but for all the wrong reasons. The restaurant manager appeared at the doorway again, concern evident on his face. Is everything all right, Ms. Evans? He asked, eyeing the half-empty table and abandoned meals. Just a family matter, I said, professional mask sliding into place. Could we get the check, please? And, if possible, have the cake boxed up. He nodded, clearly relieved that whatever drama had unfolded wasn't going to become his problem. Of course. Right away. As he left, I turned to the three remaining guests, Brian, Rachel, and Aunt Grace. I'm sorry, I said, my voice small. This isn't how I wanted tonight to go. Aunt Grace waved a dismissive hand. Families are messy, dear. Heaven knows I've caused my share of scenes over the years. What happens now? Brian asked, taking the seat beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. I don't know, I admitted. I've never confronted this directly before. I just couldn't sit through another episode of. I broke off, the words sounding harsher than I intended. Of Amber stealing your thunder? Rachel finished for me. She'd always been the one person who understood the dynamics without judgment. You're not wrong, Mackenzie. But I think what Michael said is important too. Her pain is real, even if the timing is suspect. I know that, I insisted. I've never thought she was faking the pain itself. It's the way everyone responds to it, Brian said. The way it redirects attention every single time something good happens for you. I nodded, grateful for his understanding. And how no one will acknowledge the pattern, which makes me feel like I'm imagining things or being selfish for wanting my achievements to matter too. The door opened again, and to my surprise, Dad returned alone. His face looked drawn, older somehow, as he took his seat across from me. Your mother is taking Amber and Michael home, he said. She wanted me to come with them, but I thought we should talk. Dad, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you, I began, but he shook his head. No, I'm the one who should apologize, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. I've seen this pattern for years, but never had the courage to address it. It was easier to focus on your successes and leave Amber's care to your mother than to deal with the complicated emotions of having a chronically ill child. His honesty stunned me into silence. Dad had never been one for emotional discussions or admitting fault. That video, he continued, was like holding up a mirror to our family. Uncomfortable, but maybe necessary. I didn't mean to ambush everyone, I said. I recorded it for myself, to validate what I was seeing. Playing it tonight was impulsive. Understandable, given the circumstances, and Grace interjected. Sometimes a dramatic gesture is needed to break through denial. Your mother doesn't see it that way, Dad said. She thinks you planned this whole evening as some kind of gotcha moment to humiliate your sister. The accusation stung, especially because there was a grain of truth to it. Part of me had wanted validation, wanted to prove I wasn't imagining things, wanted my family to finally see the dynamic that had been playing out for years. Was Amber faking? Rachel asked the question no one else would voice directly. Dad considered this carefully. I don't think she consciously plans these episodes. But after watching that video and seeing how accurately you predicted not just what would happen, but exactly when, it's hard to believe it's purely coincidental. Subconscious behavior can be powerful, Brian offered. She might genuinely feel worse during these times without realizing why. Whatever the case, Dad said, this has forced issues into the open that we've been avoiding for too long. Your mother and we haven't been on the same page about Amber's condition for years. She believes in absolute support without question. I've had private doubts about how we might be enabling certain behaviors. Just then, the door burst open again. Mom stood there, her normally carefully maintained appearance disheveled, eyes red from crying. How could you stay here with her? She demanded of Dad. After what she did to your daughter? Linda. Dad said wearily, Mackenzie is also our daughter. Our daughter who just publicly accused her chronically ill sister of faking her symptoms for attention. Mom's voice rose with each word. That's not what I said, I protested, rising to face her. I said her pain is real, but the timing is suspicious. And you know it's true, Mom. You've just refused to see it because it's easier to focus entirely on Amber than to deal with the complex reality. Complex reality? Mom repeated incredulously. The reality is that your sister suffers every day with an invisible illness that most people, including her own sister apparently, don't even believe is real. I believe her condition is real, I insisted. What I don't believe is that it's coincidence that her worst episodes happen exclusively when attention is on me. So you're the victim here? Mom's voice dripped with sarcasm. Poor Mackenzie, so successful and healthy, but can't handle not being the center of attention for 1 minute. Her words hit like a physical blow. I'd expected resistance, but not this level of dismissal and attack. That's enough, Linda, Dad said firmly, standing beside me. This isn't helping anyone. You're taking her side now? Mom looked genuinely shocked. After everything we've been through with Amber? I'm not taking sides, Dad said. I'm saying we need to look honestly at our family dynamics. All of us. The restaurant manager appeared again, clearly disturbed by the rising voices. I'm sorry, but I must ask you to lower your voices or continue this discussion elsewhere. "We're just leaving," Mom said coldly. She turned to me, her expression harder than I'd ever seen it. "Amber is devastated. She wanted me to tell you that she won't be inconveniencing you with her presence at any future celebrations. Congratulations on your promotion. I hope it was worth the price." She stormed out, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. "I should go after her," Dad said, torn. "But Mackenzie, this conversation isn't over. We need to address this as a family." "I know," I said, suddenly exhausted. "Go, Dad. She needs you right now." After he left, the four of us remaining sat in stunned silence. The check arrived, and Brian insisted on covering it despite my protests. The cake was boxed up, a cheerful congratulations written in icing that now seemed mockingly inappropriate. As we gathered our things to leave, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Amber, not Mom as I'd expected. "I watched the whole video after you stopped it. You were right about more than you know. We need to talk, but not tonight. I'm sorry for ruining your celebration, again." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond, feeling the first tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, this catastrophic evening might lead to something healing after all. As Brian drove me home, I leaned my head against the cool window, watching the city lights blur through unshed tears. "Did I do the right thing?" I asked softly. Brian was quiet for a moment. "I don't think there was a right thing in this situation," he finally said. "But you did an honest thing, and sometimes that's more important than being right." I nodded, clutching the uneaten celebration cake on my lap, a tangible reminder of how quickly joy can transform into pain when family dynamics are involved. The promotion that should have been a pinnacle moment had become instead a potential turning point, not just in my career, but in my most fundamental relationships. 1 week after the disastrous dinner, I sat in Dr. Taylor's office, picking at a loose thread on the couch cushion. I'd recounted the entire evening in excruciating detail, including the aftermath, Mom's radio silence, Dad's cautious text messages checking in, Amber's cryptic message, followed by no further communication. "So," Dr. Taylor said, setting down her notepad, "do you regret showing the video?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret the timing and the public nature of it," I said finally. "But I don't regret bringing the pattern into the open. It needed to be addressed." She nodded. "Family systems resist change, even dysfunctional ones. What you did was disrupt a long-established pattern. That's always going to create turbulence." "Turbulence feels like an understatement," I said with a weak laugh. "More like a Category 5 hurricane. Have you spoken with Amber directly since that night?" I shook my head. I responded to her text saying I was ready to talk whenever she was, but she hasn't replied. Mom's completely frozen me out. Dad calls every couple of days, but he's walking on eggshells. "And how are you feeling about your promotion? Have you been able to celebrate that achievement at all?" The question caught me off guard. In the drama of family fallout, I'd almost forgotten the original purpose of the dinner. "My team at work threw me a small celebration lunch," I said. "And Brian took me to dinner last night. But it still feels tainted somehow." "That's understandable," Dr. Taylor said. "But remember, your accomplishment stands regardless of your family's reaction to it. You earned that promotion through your hard work and talent." I nodded, trying to internalize her words. Just then, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it automatically, then froze. "It's Amber," I said, surprised. "She's asking if I can meet her at Riverside Park in an hour. Are you comfortable with that?" Dr. Taylor asked. "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. Despite everything, I wanted to repair things with my sister. "Our session is almost over anyway." "Remember," Dr. Taylor said as I gathered my things, approach the conversation with openness rather than defensiveness. "Listen as much as you speak. And remember that healing isn't linear. There may be steps forward and back." An hour later, I sat on a bench by the river, watching joggers and dog walkers enjoy the crisp autumn afternoon. I spotted Amber before she saw me, walking slowly but steadily, without Michael or any other support. She wore jeans and a light sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more like the sister I remembered from childhood. "Hi," she said, sitting beside me, leaving careful space between us. "Hi," I replied, suddenly unsure what to say despite rehearsing this moment in my mind for days. We sat in awkward silence for a moment, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water. "I'm sorry about your dinner," she finally said. "You deserve to celebrate your promotion properly." "Thank you," I said. "And I'm sorry about how I handled things." The video was, well, it wasn't my finest moment. Amber nodded, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "But you weren't wrong," she said quietly. "I watched the whole video after Mom took me home that night. You stopped it before the end, but I heard everything you said." I winced, remembering my unfiltered thoughts captured in that recording. "At first I was just hurt and angry," she continued. "But then I couldn't sleep, and I started thinking about all the incidents you mentioned. Your graduation, your engagement party, your first promotion dinner. And the pattern was undeniable." Her admission stunned me. I'd expected denial, defensiveness, anything but this quiet acknowledgement. "I talked to Michael about it," she went on. "He's noticed it too, but didn't know how to bring it up. And then I talked to my therapist. Yes, I have one too," she added with a small smile at my surprised expression. "I've been seeing her for 2 years, mainly for pain management strategies." "I didn't know," I said. "There's a lot we don't know about each other anymore," she replied. "That's part of the problem." She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "My therapist helped me see something I've been avoiding. When I got sick, I lost everything I thought defined me: my education, my career path, my independence. The only role I had left was the sick one, the person everyone worried about and took care of." I listened, really listened, hearing the pain behind her words. "And you," she continued, "you were becoming everything I thought I would be: successful, independent, building a career and relationships on your terms. Every time you achieved something new, it reminded me of everything I'd lost. My pain is real, Mackenzie, but the timing, that was my subconscious wanting to reclaim the only power I felt I had left." Tears filled my eyes at her raw honesty. "I never wanted to compete with you, Amber. I just wanted to share my life with you, to have you be happy for me the way I would have been for you." "I know," she said, her own eyes welling up. "And part of me was genuinely happy for you. But another part was so jealous it physically hurt. And that made me feel like a terrible person, which made the pain worse, which created this awful cycle." We sat with that truth between us, neither speaking for several minutes. "Where do we go from here?" I finally asked. "Mom's still furious with you," Amber said. "She's made your confrontation into another way to focus exclusively on me and my feelings. But Dad, he's been asking questions, suggesting that maybe they've enabled certain patterns." "And you? What do you want?" Amber turned to face me fully. "I want my sister back," she said simply. "I want us to find a way forward that acknowledges my condition without making it the center of our relationship. I want to celebrate your successes without feeling diminished by them. I just don't know exactly how to do that yet. Maybe we start with honesty," I suggested. "No more tiptoeing around difficult truths. No more unspoken resentments. And therapy," Amber added. "My therapist suggested we might benefit from some sessions together. Would you consider that?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." She smiled then, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Congratulations on your promotion, by the way. Marketing director at 29 is pretty impressive. Tell me about the Meridian campaign. I saw some of the billboards downtown and they looked amazing." And just like that, we began the slow work of rebuilding. We talked for 2 hours on that park bench, covering everything from my promotion to her relationship with Michael, from our childhood memories to our hopes for the future. For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my sister, not my sister's illness. 3 weeks later, We had our first joint therapy session. A week after that, we invited our parents to join us. Those early family sessions were tense, tearful, and sometimes heated, but they were honest in a way our interactions hadn't been for years. Mom initially resisted, clinging to her role as Amber's protector and my antagonist. But as Amber herself began to establish healthier boundaries, Mom gradually, reluctantly began to examine her own behavior patterns. Dad, to everyone's surprise, flourished in therapy, finding words for feelings he'd suppressed for decades. At work, I threw myself into my new role as marketing director, the initial taint of that disastrous dinner fading as I embraced the challenges and opportunities of the position. Brian remained steadfastly supportive, never pushing but always there when I needed to process the ongoing family work. 6 months after the dinner at Preston's, we tried again. A different restaurant, a smaller gathering, just the immediate family. Amber had a visible flare-up during dessert, her hands trembling as she tried to lift her coffee cup. But instead of collapsing or withdrawing, she simply said, "I'm having a rough pain moment. Can someone pass the cream?" Dad helped with the cream. Mom asked once if she needed medication, and then the conversation continued. The moment wasn't ignored, but it didn't become the focal point of the evening either. It was a small victory, but a significant one. That night, as Brian and I walked home through the city streets, he asked what I was thinking about. "I was thinking about success," I said. "How I always defined it by promotions and achievements and recognition. But maybe true success is this, finding the courage to break dysfunctional patterns, to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable, to rebuild relationships on more authentic foundations." "That sounds like wisdom earned the hard way," he said, squeezing my hand. "The hardest," I agreed, "but also the most valuable." As we reach the end of this journey together, I'd love to know if you've ever had to confront uncomfortable family dynamics for the sake of your own well-being. Did you find healing afterward, or are you still working through it? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your story might help someone else feeling stuck in similar patterns. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complicated relationships, and share with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak our truth, even when it's difficult. Thank you for walking this path with me. May we all find the courage to seek authenticity in our most important relationships.